Hello there and welcome to, this is week 5, if I'm not wrong, of Atheism for Lent. I know that some of you were saying that you were starting to slow down by last week, and I'm interested actually in finding out a little bit more about the stuff that you find easy, the stuff you find difficult, etc., etc. And I know Nicole, who is doing the course and is an expert in marketing stuff, is chatting with me about potentially getting feedback from people about that. But I did notice on the WhatsApp group, people were going, whoa, last week was very turgid, a lot of stuff to get through. So that is true. But you're getting close to the end, so keep going. And also, if you can't do everything, that's totally fine. Better to do, say, 3 reflections in the week and really take your time with them than potentially rushing through them all. So you have the stuff for life and you can go back to it. What I want to do now is I'll just say a few words about the journey we have taken so far. And then obviously introduce what you're going to see this week. So the whole structure, as you know now, is dialectic. And dialectics is this dance of affirmation, negation of negation. In a nutshell, you have a position, God exists, for example, then a negation of that position is God doesn't exist, and then a negation of negation would be God does not exist, right? And that's the strange one, right? Which then becomes its own shape, and then that can be negated. And this is a way of seeing how thought can develop, right? So it's not just there's various positions and they fight for all eternity. There is movement within thought and change within thought. And what happens in this dialectic journey of atheism for Lent, and something I haven't talked about this year, is that you see how religion takes different shapes. So again, religion, instead of thinking about it just purely like as something that's static, religion undergoes changes, and they undergo small changes and large changes. You could say some of it's to do with content, and then some of it's to do with form, a radically different shape of religion. And what I want to do maybe in this introduction this week is just draw attention to the shapes that you've seen develop, and the shape of religion in particular that is coming up this week. So week 1 was the affirmation, God exists. So there's your affirmation, God exists, and we looked at some of the great arguments for the existence of God, the teleological, the cosmological, the ontological. Then the next week we had the negation, right? So God does not exist. And we saw how interesting, just like in dialectics, the negation blossoms often out of the affirmation, right? It's often the people who go deepest into something who find the problems with it, right? And those are the most perceptive critiques. And anyway, so the atheism of week 2 is a type of negation of week 1. And then week 3, this is the first kind of circle of dialectics, because week 3 was the negation of negation. And in week 3, basically what that meant is it took the negative out of the negation. It made it into an affirmation. So God exists, God doesn't exist. God is that which is otherwise than existence, right? God, to exist is to be an object, that you can taste, touch and see. God is beyond existence. And so it takes up all of the atheistic critiques and sees them as a type of purification process, a type of spiritual purification that actually, instead of leading you away from the truth of the signifier God, what that word God means, it can actually enhance our understanding of it. Okay, so that was that movement. Then in week 4, which was last week, you could say that this was now the negation of that new affirmation. So the mystics, that becomes the new affirmation. And then the materialist, the functionalist critique negated that. And it negated it in a particular way. It said, right, you're thinking of, I'm spiritual, not religious, basically. You're having a spiritual experience. Religion is the kind of the excremental remainder of that spiritual experience. Then last week, they negated that and said, yeah, forget, who cares about this spiritual experience that you can have on your own, fill your boots. But actually, it's religion that's got all the interesting stuff. Religion tells us potentially about ourselves, about our society. It can either be a liberating force or an oppressive force. So they negate the mystics by taking up the very thing that the mystics actually opened up, right? Because the mystics in this narrative that we're telling, they are the ones that really opened up the idea of religion being a human creation, right? So, of course, that's a view that's held by lots of different people at lots of different times, but actually the mystics are among the first to really delve into that idea in a sophisticated way. Not the only ones, but it's definitely where that idea of religion being human, all too human, not living up to, not expressing the reality that it sometimes pretends to express. And that opens up the way then for last week. That opens up the way to go, okay, so now we can treat religion as a human construct. What can this tell us? What value does that have? And, we saw Feuerbach says, yeah, religion tells us about our own essence. You see Mark saying religion tells us about the ideals of a given epoch and makes them, in a sense, spiritual. You also saw with Goldman, religion can be a tool of oppression, etc., etc. These are different thinkers who go like, there's something very valuable to the critique of religion. In fact, Karl Marx, in that piece that you read, a very famous line where he says, religious critique is the beginning of all critique. I think that was it. All critique begins in religious critique. I can't remember the exact line. It's been a while since I've read it, but basically he's saying that once you've critiqued God and religion and you start to see that it's really speaking about our human experience, that allows us also to start critiquing governments and worldly powers. The same critique that we do on God, we need to do with secular society itself. And that's a really interesting idea that Nietzsche also goes into in a different way. Okay, so that journey then is week 1, affirmation, God exists. Week 2, negation, God doesn't exist. Week 3, God is that which is beyond existence. Right? Then that becomes the new affirmation, and then last week the functionist critique becomes the negation of that, and so this week is the negation of negation. It's where these thinkers in different ways will take up and take seriously, that's very key, not just to take up and to take seriously this body of thought that went before them, right? And find something in it. Right, to that kind of, in a sense, affirms the first affirmation. That kind of gets to something in that, but now that it's passed through the negation. So the negation of negation in some ways seems to give you what the first step couldn't give you without going through the negation. Okay, I'll try and now make some sense of that. And the thinkers, again, like last week, I can't bunch them all together and say they're saying the same thing at all. They're not. So there's also an artist in the midst of this. There might be a musician. I might change a few things this week. But at the moment, you have Paul Tillich, you have Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you have Barnett Newman, you have Simone Weil, and an article from Time magazine about the death of God theologians. And broadly speaking, right, I say broadly speaking, what you could say about this new shape of religion is that it orients itself to a non-reducible dimension within religion, right? What I mean by that is instead of thinking of religion as speaking about the existence or non-existence of God, right, which is the first shape of religion, God as something that exists or something that doesn't exist, right? This approach, these thinkers, to greater or lesser degrees, are saying something like, forget about whether God exists or not. Forget about that metaphysical question. Religion is an orientation to a promise or a hope or a truth that is within the world. It's a religion at its best orients us fully to the world, just like last week. We're fully oriented to the world. We're fully oriented to our neighbour, to transformation of the world. But there's a dimension within that is not reducible to materiality. Right, now I'll explain what I mean in relation to Paul Tillich. I think it's clearest in Paul Tillich and in Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But for Paul Tillich, he talks about religion as an embrace of what he calls ultimate concern. An ultimate concern, in a nutshell, can be described as what it is that you're ultimately concerned about, and a type of concern that reaches out to something ultimate. So what Tillich is saying is, in a way, to be human is to experience oneself as being taken up by things that are more important than you, that are more important than your happiness, that are more important than your fulfillment, that's more important than any utilitarian kind of like calculation about how to do best in life. What Immanuel Kant would call a non-pathological dimension to existence, which means an aspect of life that is oriented beyond animalistic pleasures and avoiding pain, right? And so Tillich says that within life, to be human is to feel this ultimate concern. Even if you're depressed, depression can be thought of as that which dulls ultimate concern. Because when you're depressed, it's not that you don't desire one thing or something. You don't really desire at all, right? Your desire doesn't function properly or isn't functioning, and you find it hard to really get pleasure out of anything, right? So there's a sense of this gets dulled in us. But ultimate concern, I think Tillich would say, is always there. And we have to protect that and fan it into life. And in his book, My Search for Absolutes, which I think is the section I'm giving you this week, and I'd recommend the whole book. It's a short book. You can read it very, very quickly. But he talks about how in the realm of knowledge, there is this idea of truth that you never land on, but that animates the pursuit. So the scientist who is, for example, trying to understand the nature of the universe, some cosmologist, they are always putting forward theories that can become increasingly sophisticated, and maybe a theory that really becomes established. But still, it never fully grasps what it's trying to express. There's always more you can do in movement. In a way, truth isn't so much what you land on, it's what inspires this eternal failure, right? To feel, but to try to feel better, and to kind of to articulate truth, but always in a sense knowing that truth is not so much a destination as what's inspiring the very process. And the same then with beauty. With an artist who's painting, they want to paint something beautiful. But there's a certain sense in which the beauty is always elusive. So you can paint the same thing again and again and explore the same subject matter again and again from different angles. Because beauty is not so much what is nailed down in the painting. Beauty at a deeper level is what inspires you to pick up the paintbrush. It's something that you never get, but are always moving towards. And justice as well, Tillich then takes up, which is the idea that within the legal, because he's actually, that book, if I'm correct, it was written to law students, it was a set of seminars given to law students. And he was saying that when you study law, you want to be just, right? This is something Derrida, the philosopher, talks about incredibly beautifully, is that you as a lawyer, you want to stand up for justice. But the law never is fully just. It never coincides absolutely with justice. So you are not so much naming justice as being inspired if you're doing it correctly, right? You're not just in it for the money or whatever, or in it to defend an unjust system. If you're there because you really want to do good, justice is what inspires you. So that's what kind of ultimate concern is. And you can see how ultimate concern arises in different ways depending on the discipline. So I mentioned, science and truth, artistry and beauty, and the legal system and justice. Now, for Paul Tillich, religion doesn't have one of those. What religion is about is keeping that space open in whatever realm of life you find it, right? That there's something about religion that is about being sensitive to that call of justice, of love, of beauty, of goodness, that gives us meaning even when life is painful, that helps us get up in the morning, that potentially is valuable, and also that takes us beyond some narcissistic self-interest, that we kind of become caught up in something larger than ourselves. Now, you'll notice there that this is not about theism or atheism as such, right? This could be called a phenomenological understanding of religion. So you've got a shape of religion that's all about, does God exist or not? And this shape of religion that you're going to find in different ways this week is a shape of religion which is not kind of interested in that question. They're going, no, faith is about an openness to a promise or a call. So someone like John Caputo, who is not in this week, but he probably should be, so I might add him. He's later on. But John Caputo wrote a beautiful book called On Religion, and he argued from a very, what's called post-structuralist view, that religion is about love, and it is about an openness to a call to love, to justice, to hospitality that can never be nailed down. And it's kind of like, it's that sense of something beyond, basically beyond economy, right? In economy, everything is you give something, you get something in return. That's what economics is, right? You give something, you get something in return, and it's about how we exchange things, whether it's money, possessions, even in relationships. There's give and take, right? And that's fine. We live in the world of give and take. But in that, we also have to have what's called gift. And gift is non-economy. Gift is where you give something without return, right? And there's a lot of interesting things we could say about gift, because in a sense, it's very hard to imagine if there really is a gift. Like if you buy a gift and you don't get thanks for it, you might be annoyed. Or you buy a gift, you might do it because it makes you feel good, and then you're getting something in return. So what does it mean to give a gift that is really a gift? Derrida had a beautiful thought experiment to help us understand what a gift might look like. And just very quickly, he basically said, okay, well, let's imagine you get a gift for somebody, and you give them it, and they feel great and they say thank you. Well, okay, you're actually in a bit of an exchange here. So let's imagine you buy a gift and you give it anonymously, so you don't get their thanks, right? So you're not doing it in order for them to buy you something or think you're great. So you buy them a gift, but you anonymously put it in, like maybe buy them groceries so they don't have money. Your friend needs this help, or your neighbour needs this help, so you anonymously buy groceries for them. And then Derrida says, yes, well, but still, of course, you could feel great about yourself. Imagine, you do that and you go like, I'm a good person, right? And you can congratulate yourself. And he actually, even before that, I'll say that you can see what the response is, and you can feel really good about that response. So let's go for a second gift, right? What about a gift where the person doesn't know they received the gift, right? So if the first gift, you give it to them and they thank you. This second gift is, they don't know that you've given the gift, like the anonymous groceries. They don't know you've given the gift, and nothing has been given, right? You haven't given anything that they can even be thankful for. So maybe this would be like the gift of forgiveness, where you forgive someone, but you don't even tell them that you've forgiven them. You just forgive them. So that's a gift where the person doesn't know they received a gift and nothing's given. But Derrida says, yeah, but it could still be an economy because, you could feel good about yourself. I'm a great forgiving person. So he says, what would it be like to have a gift where the person doesn't know they've received it, nothing is given, and you don't know you've given it, right? And in this way, you go, right, okay, there's no economy, but what is that? Because that doesn't exist. You go, like, yeah, it's interesting. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, right? Is that, in a way, maybe the true gift is when you do forgive somebody, but you don't even know you're doing it yourself. You just forgive them. And I say you're not even aware. You're not even aware of it. It just happened. And the problem with that is the gift seems like it doesn't exist. As soon as you see it, it no longer exists. So what beautifully happens in this thought experiment is you begin to go, oh, this is something that doesn't exist, but it insists. It's always happening behind your back. It's always happening when you can't see it. But so it's not there, but it is there. It's everywhere, but you never catch a glimpse of it, right? And so these thinkers are going, well, what if religion is about that? And faith? What if faith is about being open to this dimension of love and care and concern for justice and hospitality and mercy, and which can never be landed upon, and yet you can't get away from. So you've got this really interesting bind where you go, like, you can't get away from those things. They're everywhere. No matter where you run, you can't get away from them, and yet you can never find them, right? Now, Paul Tillich famously said, he had a quote where he said, sometimes I feel that my job is to bring faith to the faithless and doubt to the faithful. And one way of understanding this phrase is very interesting. So he says, faith to the faithless. So what he wants to say is, he wants to say religion, at its best, this shape of religion that they're talking about, is one that gives us faith in the gift, in love, in beauty and truth, that can never be seen and never be grasped. It's there and yet not there. So it's an orientation to that. So religion at its best is about that. That's the first bit, faith to the faithless. And then doubt to the faithful. What's that about? Well, then Tillich talks about demonic religion. Demonic religion is religion that reduces justice to a form of justice that we have, that reduces hospitality purely to a hospitality that we know, that reduces love to an understanding of love that we have, right? So what it does is it takes this infinite and makes it finite, right? And that's the demonic. And he sees this demonic in the secular world and things like fascism, and he sees it in the religious world and in any religion that nails things down and that says that, oh, the justice, this is what hospitality looks like. This is what justice looks like. We've got it. So he says there has to be doubt in the heart of the faithfulness. And to go back to the example of the scientist who in a way does not doubt truth. They have this certainty in the heart that there is truth, right? But they will always have doubt as to how that truth is written and spoken, is understood, right? So there is this faithfulness and this doubt radically interconnected. Now, you will notice, it's funny because when you watch some new atheists, they don't even know this form of religion, right? That's the funny thing. So I've listened to a lot of Dawkins in my time and very much respect Richard Dawkins, but for him, religion is either you believe in God, right? That's when you believe in God, and or you're religious, as in like you're an Anglican, you do these rituals and whatever, right? But actually, there's a very robust shape of religion, very robust 20th century shape of religion that is very much about saying this is an openness to this promise, to this possibility of justice and love and mercy and this care for the other. Now, we will go deeper into that in the next week, right? So that's an important element that we're going to be looking at. But this this week, these people begin to open that up. So even Simone Weil, who's a favourite of mine, she talks about, well, one is atheism as a purification process, but God as a type of gap, as a type of opening that keeps desire alive. So if you think of like Paul Tillich's ultimate concern as a desire for something you can never get, a desire for something you can never have, you'll probably have heard me talk about Simone Weil's famous reflections on God as a type of miser's treasure, right? The miser never spends the treasure, right? But they have to have it. They don't have it because they don't use it. They just have to have it close to them, and that keeps their desire alive. If the miser loses their treasure, they're devastated. But why are they devastated? Because they never spent it, right? But they oriented themselves at a distance from the treasure that kept their desire alive. And Simone Weil says, in a way, that's how desire works. And God is the name for the spatiality. God is the name for this space that keeps us desiring something that, unlike the miser's treasure, which is hypothetically possible to get, is something that is inherently impossible to get. So that connects with Paul Tillich's ultimate concern, that justice and love and mercy are like impossibilities that we orient ourselves around, that generate desire. And demonic religions, they closes that down, but proper capital R religion for Tillich keeps us open to that and keeps our hearts sensitive to that promise. And that's also something that you get in Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who this will be opening up, I think that's your reflection tomorrow, he basically argues for a new Reformation, a Reformation being a different shape of religion. So that's what a Reformation is when something happens that so radically reshapes what already exists. And his Reformation was the idea that God is necessary for salvation, that heaven, that this idea of a God out there who's going to kind of like give us meaning and make us sleep better at night. He calls that the Deus Ex Machina, and he says the next shape of religion won't have that. And he talks about a shape of religion that will be a celebration of the world, an embrace of otherness. And he says that in this embrace of the world, something of the truth of religion, deeper than theism, will arise. Now, many of the thinkers this week would call themselves theists. It's not that they're post-theist necessarily. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. But their theism is very different. And again, that's why the new atheists of the type that you saw in week 2 don't know what to do with this, because they're arguing about God when someone like Paul Tillich will be like, hold on, or John Caputo will be like, hold on. Like, if religion is anything, it is orienting ourselves to something non-material, something that is not in the world, right? Like, think of the signifier God. God names that which cannot be signified, right? So in this is religion there's something in the world that doesn't exist, we can't grasp it, and yet is the most existing of all things. It's like it exists more than the material stuff we see, like truth, beauty, justice. These don't exist, they insist, and they insist in a way that makes them feel like a type of hyper existence, right? And then someone like Paul Tillich would argue in a very sophisticated way that is a reality of being human. That's a reality of being a creature of language. This is the reality of how we find ourselves in the world, and that again, so something like new atheism does not do justice to that. Cannot do justice to this experience of an insistent reality within everything that is captured in things like Jesus saying, love your enemy and love your neighbour. Like these ideas of love, this care for the other, that's not about belief in something, but about a radical openness to some a radical openness to care and concern beyond material realities. Okay, I don't know if that's clear enough. I'll use one example and I'll see if there's any questions. I guess a very concrete non-religious example is, and I've talked about this before I think, but like in every culture has gifts there's an economy, but if you do not have gift giving, you won't have civilization. And gift giving might be like in Ireland, buying people rounds of drinks. It might be buying a bottle of wine, going to a dinner party. It might be presents at certain times. But there will be these rituals in which something is given technically without return. Now, it's often called by anthropologists gift exchange, because it is kind of a system in which I buy a round and then next week you buy a round. So, but it's different from a basic economy. There's trust, and you don't have to buy a round, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but that is vital. Like, if everything was just reduced to pure economy, the world would collapse. And so, in some respects, analogous to that, these thinkers are saying that religion opens up a space of negativity that is required for civilization to survive and thrive. Religion orients us to this negativity and to this impossibility, and that is kind of not just some added extra to our lives, but that's actually gets to the very heart of what it means to be human. It gets to the very heart of what it means to affirm life. And whenever we are, and Marx talked about this interestingly, he said, like, in work, often the most animalistic parts of ourselves are the only things that matter. And how did he say it? He said it in a very, very good way, but I won't do it justice. But what matters is eating and getting a break, and we just become very functional. And what gives life meaning is the stuff of art, the stuff of truth, the stuff of beauty, the stuff of love. These are the things that make life beautiful. And actually, our society can often continue to make those things into commodities, right? Make love into something you can subscribe to with OnlyFans or whatever, or sex, or like everything becomes a commodity, and we lose something important. And so the existentialists were very key, and some of these people you're looking at are existential theologians. The existentialists were about fighting for a dimension of existence that cannot be commodified and should not be commodified, and religion is seen as potentially protecting that dimension.